Now, with all the stories making their headlines this Tuesday lunchtime, it's the ITV News.
Ukraine demands Russia is expelled from the UN Human Rights Council over the massacre of innocent civilians. The country's president will address the UN Security Council in a matter of hours after witnessing the alleged war crimes for himself. A musician pleads guilty to the murder of teenager Ann Macleod after snatching her from a bus stop in Plymouth. 2 members of a British family have died and 3 others are in hospital after a landslide in Australia.
Any situation as has been described is obviously exceptionally confronting, heartbreaking, especially when you start involving children.
Easyjet apologises for travel chaos as Manchester's mayor warns the police might have to be called in. And Britney Spears signs a multi-million-pound deal for a book telling her life story. Good afternoon. In the next few hours, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky will address the UN Security Council about alleged war crimes carried out in his country. It's after he visited Bucha, one of the cities where it's claimed Russian forces massacred innocent civilians. Satellite photographs suggest bodies have been lying on the streets for weeks. The Ukrainian leader has vowed to find those responsible for the atrocities. He says Moscow cannot deceive the whole world, despite its attempts to distort the facts. His speech this afternoon comes as world leaders demand Russia is removed from the UN Human Rights Council. John Ray sent this report from Odessa.
In these war-ravaged streets, a few miles to the north of Kiev, the guns have fallen silent. But there is no peace. A grandmother mourns her daughter. She was just trying to protect her children, she says. A Russian tank killed them all. At least she has a cross to mark their grave. Others here search for loved ones long missing among the dead that lie unclaimed in the streets. Vadim and Tetiana are searching for their son.
What can we do? He's either kidnapped or killed. If he were alive and not in captivity, he would have already returned home.
Moscow's denials seem contradictory. It says the scenes of death are both a fake and a false flag operation to blame the Russians. Their UN ambassador called it a Western provocation.
During the time that the town has been under the control of the Russian armed forces, not a single local resident has suffered from any violent action.
And yet, this satellite image taken during the weeks of Russia's occupation appears to show bodies lying in the open. Ukraine calls this genocide. It is feared that the newly liberated town of Borodyanka, northwest of the capital, will reveal amid its ruins atrocities on an even greater scale. Later today, President Zelensky will address the Security Council. He has already promised that Russian troops will be investigated and face international justice. In Mariupol, after defending the besieged city for weeks, some Ukrainian forces have surrendered. A Red Cross convoy bringing aid to the city was stopped and turned back in Russian-controlled territory close by. Further to the west, as air raid sirens sounded, hundreds more refugees left Odessa for the border with Poland. Long before there can be any war crime trials, there is a war to be won and lost. John Ray, ITV News, Odessa.
A musician has pleaded guilty to the murder of teenager Ann Macleod. The 18-year-old went missing in November and was last seen at a bus stop in Plymouth. She was on her way to meet friends but never arrived. Cody Ackland appeared at Plymouth Crown Court this morning to enter his plea. Rebecca Barry was in court this morning. Rebecca.
In the courtroom this morning, you could hear members of Ann Macleod's family crying quietly as they sat in the public gallery. The judge acknowledged that it was a tense and difficult time, but warned everyone in the courtroom that they must remain silent during proceedings. Then, 24-year-old Cody Ackland, who was a guitarist in a local band, was brought up from the cells. He confirmed his name and date of birth, and when asked how he pleaded to the charge of murder, he replied, guilty. The judge told him that his sentence was fixed by law and would be imprisonment for life. The only issue will be the minimum term. 18-year-old Ann Macleod was last seen at a bus stop in Plymouth in November last year as she went out to meet friends. Her body was found 3 days later near a beach around 7 miles from her home. At the time, police said there was no known link between her and her killer, and at an opening inquest last year, no cause of death was given. Today, Devon and Cornwall police said that their thoughts remain with Ann Macleod's family and all that knew her, who'd had a daughter, a sister and a friend so cruelly taken from them. Cody Ackland will be sentenced on the 19th of May.
Rebecca in Plymouth, thank you. A British father and son have been killed in a landslide in Australia. The family of 5 was walking in the Blue Mountains near Sydney. 2 other members of the same family were airlifted to hospital. Now, Sangeeta Lal joins me now in the studio. Sangeeta, what more do we know at this point?
Well, rescue teams say this was a freak accident on what should have been a holiday of a lifetime. Now, this area where the family were visiting is a really popular tourist spot. The Blue Mountains are known for the dramatic scenery and the range of walks. The family were on something known as a Wentworth Pass Track walk. It's a 5-hour loop, which is known to be quite steep and quite difficult. That's when the landslide hit, which we now know killed the 49-year-old father and 9-year-old boy. Another 14-year-old son and the mother, who was 50 years old, were winched to safety and are being treated in hospital after suffering severe head and abdominal injuries. Their other 15-year-old daughter, though, has been treated for shock. She spent hours trying to help rescue teams find her family and was found in a very distressed state.
Any situation as has been described is obviously exceptionally confronting, heartbreaking, especially when you start involving children. And hence the fact that we've got ambulance chaplains and peer support officers here to support our people, as well as the other emergency services, because, again, the nature of the incident is quite distressing.
Now, you're left wondering, of course, how could something like this happen to somewhere that's visited so regularly? Well, the National Park and Wildlife Service, which looks after the area, say they inspected that exact track just 2 days before the incident. It happened yesterday. They said there was nothing there that posed any risk to anyone. Everything they're seeing now is pointing in the direction of a freak accident, a family in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Sangeeta, thank you. The government's LGBT business champion has resigned over the decision to exclude transgender people from a conversion therapy ban. Ian Anderson has accused the government of waging a woke war. He spoke exclusively to our UK editor Paul Brand, who joins me now. Now, Paul, what more has Mr Anderson said?
Well, as you say, Ian Anderson is the government's LGBT business champion, but he feels he can no longer trumpet the government's own policies. And this is all over the story that we broke last Thursday about the government reneging on its promise to ban conversion therapy. Now, after we broke that story, the government did row back and it said, OK, we'll go ahead, we will ban conversion therapy, but only for gay and bisexual people and not for transgender people. And Ian Anderson sent his resignation letter to the Prime Minister about half an hour ago, saying for him, that is a red line, that ban must include trans people, as he explained to me exclusively earlier.
There comes a moment in public life where your principles are really important, and my principles are around LGBT inclusion, and I feel what the government is doing is trying to create a wedge between LGBT people and trans people. I think it's the wrong approach, and I disagree with the policy.
Were you aware that the government was about to drop its ban on conversion therapy before we broke the story last Thursday?
This came as a complete bolt out of the blue, not just to me, but to the Minister for Women and Equalities, to the LGBT envoy. I was completely shocked.
And you've sat in that room with the powers that be. How would you characterise their approach to trans people?
I think Britain needs a strategy. Government needs a strategy for trans people. I can't see a strategy at the moment. I think, sadly, we have a tabloid debate going on about people's lives. It's not a respectful debate. It's turned into a woke war. It's turned into a wedge issue. That's not my kind of politics.
Do you accept the argument of those who worry that a ban on conversion therapy might stifle discussion, particularly for those who want to explore their gender identity before they go through a potentially irreversible process?
This is a very complicated issue. It absolutely is, but it doesn't deserve to be ducked. Canada has passed legislation. France has passed legislation. New Zealand has passed legislation. It's surely not beyond the wit of government draftsmen to be able to progress this.
Well, the government says it is still looking into the issue of trans conversion therapy, but as you heard there in my interview with Ian Anderson, the concern from the government's point of view is that there may be unintended consequences in any law, that it might prevent healthy exploration of someone's gender identity in a therapeutic setting, and then it wouldn't allow people to make a really kind of thorough decision before they potentially go through irreversible processes. Others, though, say that a law can be designed to get around all of that, to take account of all of that, but this government, I don't think, is going to be the one to introduce that law.
Paul, thank you. Passengers are being warned that more travel chaos is to come because of COVID. Easyjet has apologised to its customers for the disruption. The airline had to cancel more than 60 flights yesterday and more than 200 at the weekend. Well, Yasmin Boddleby is at Manchester Airport for us this morning. Yasmin, what's the situation like there?
Well, Lucy, we've been watching planes coming and going, bringing thousands of passengers in and out of Manchester Airport all morning. But it seems like they just don't have the staff to cope with those numbers. We're now well into the first school holiday since the start of the pandemic, where we haven't had any travel restrictions and people want to travel. But Manchester Airport just don't have the staff to cope. It's an industry-wide problem. During the pandemic, they cut loads of jobs and they're now really struggling to scale up in time for the rush. That's led to scenes like this at Manchester Airport, with people queuing for hours to get through and in some cases even missing their flights. And that's also led to Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham suggesting that they might need to bring the police and fire and rescue in to try to help. He and union officials are meeting with Manchester Airport bosses later this afternoon to discuss the idea. Now, I should just say that it's not just Manchester, but Heathrow and Birmingham have also had problems in recent days. And just to compound the travel misery, if you do manage to get through those security queues, you might find that your flight is actually cancelled. Lots of airlines are having to cancel because of high COVID sickness. So Easyjet's cancelled 60 flights today. They're warning that those problems could well continue into the next few days.
Yasmin in Manchester, thank you. From tomorrow, married couples in England and Wales who want to get divorced will be able to do so without blaming each other. No-fault divorce is the biggest reform to the law in 50 years. Solicitors are predicting an increase in cases as a result, putting more pressure on the courts. Well, joining me now are Samantha Woodham and Harry Gates. They're barristers who run the divorce surgery, which provides one lawyer per couple to try and reach a settlement quicker. Now, good afternoon to you both. Samantha, I'll come to you first. Why is this such a change for the legal profession?
It's a huge change for couples because it means that when they start the divorce process, they don't have to attribute blame. They don't have to give a reason for why their marriage is coming to an end. And really importantly, it means they can apply for divorce together. So you no longer have one person putting in the petition or application and the other responding. Couples can do it together. And we really think this is going to be a launch pad for a much bigger change. which is a shift in how we view divorce overall, that it's a process that couples can navigate together and work together through it, rather than seeing it as a battle that has a winner and a loser.
Harry, so what does this actually mean? That it'll be easier to get a divorce?
Well, it's never been easy to get a divorce. All the couples that we've seen over the many, many years that we've been practicing have all found it hard to get divorced. And I think they'll still find it hard to get divorced afterwards. What's changing is that a more kind process is being brought in. So rather than adding to the obvious emotional turmoil that divorce brings, we are taking away from it by making a much kinder, easier process that couples can navigate, and as Sam was saying a moment ago, by working together.
Samantha, to you now, do you think it will change how couples approach marriage then?
So I think that divorce and marriage are inextricably linked. And I think what we've been wanting to do, and society as a whole wants to do actually, is to see a shift in how we view divorce. You know, when you get married, that's a commitment. And when you get divorced, it's important to approach it in the same spirit actually as you approached the marriage. Let's do this decently. Let's work together. Let's get to a fair outcome for both of us and any children that we have. And increasingly, that's what judges want couples to do. That's what all the research is showing, that the difficulties with divorce are caused by conflict. So what we need to do is remove the conflict inherent in the process. And that's very much what we're trying to do here, and what we talked about in our new book, is actually couples can work together through divorce, and that's the best way to reach a resolution which works for them both and their children.
Samantha and Harry, thank you both for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Today marks 40 years since the British task force left for the Falklands at the start of the war, which would claim the lives of 255 British soldiers. To mark the anniversary, one of the most seriously injured survivors, veteran Simon Weston, has returned for what he says will be the final time. He was aboard the ship Sagalahad when it was bombed during the conflict. Louisa James reports.
The British ship the Sagalahad, on fire off the coast of the Falkland Islands, became one of the defining images of the conflict. 48 men died when the vessel was bombed by the Argentinians. 97 were wounded. Among them, Simon Weston, then 20 years old. He was left with burns so severe his mother didn't recognise him. 40 years on, we took him back to the Falklands for what he says is his final farewell.
I'm saying goodbye to my friends for the very last time. And they will forever be here. They will forever be on the memorials, in the graves. That's left me with a bittersweet taste in my mouth, because they were important. They were important to me. They were important to us as a regiment, but they were important to their families.
The 255 British lives lost are remembered at this cemetery in San Carlos.
My best pal, Andy Walker. Yeah, and with boys from the SAS as well.
On the other side of the island is Fitzroy, where on June the 8th, 1982, Argentinian fighter jets dropped 500-pound bombs on the Sagalahad and a second British ship, the Sir Tristram, while they were moored and waiting to unload soldiers from the Welsh Guards.
Sagalahad was destroyed there. The lifeboats came in and were being pulled ashore here in this little inlet. This is where they came into. Inside the ship, it was like a charnel house. It was just death and destruction everywhere. I remember being lifted off the ship out there. I remember all the guys sat around on top with injuries. And I remember being flown over to Fitzroy settlement to land just outside the community centre to go in to be triaged. And I remember I was just in a t-shirt and my underpants by now, because they'd cut all the stuff off me because it was still burning. And all my legs were open, all the blisters and the burns and everything. And the cold, I just remember the bitter cold of it all. And then they towed the Sagalahad out there and they sunk her as a war grave. We were so close and yet so far away from safety. And we were just left there for too long. You know, I've been able to take positives out of it, which is really hard to say to people, because when you have so much damage to your body and you're disfigured and you're disabled because of it, but for some unknown reason I've been able to really make the best of it.
That was Good Morning Britain's Louisa James reporting there on the Falklands veteran Simon Weston's memories of the war. Finally, Britney Spears has confirmed she is in the process of writing a book about her life. It's expected to include things she's never spoken about openly before. Until recently, all her finances and career decisions were legally controlled by her father. A judge ended that legal guardianship in November. As Rishi Davda now reports, the singer's fiancé says he will be the first to buy a copy of the book.
Britney Spears has seemingly confirmed that she'll tell all in a new self-authored book. It's been reported in the US that Britney's book deal is worth around £11 million, but we don't yet have a release date. Spears took down her post detailing how writing the book had been healing and therapeutic, and instead replaced it with a new video and a cryptic caption. It's spring break. Find the nearest book club. There are definitely some juicy ones. Or don't underestimate the traditional library card. Rishi Davda, ITV News.
Well, that is it from the Lunchtime team. Mary Nightingale will be here with the ITV Evening News at 6:30 tonight. The news where you are is next after the national weather. But for now, from all of us here, bye-bye.